Hey everyone! Today we're going to walk through the client data import template, which is going to be what's required, what's optional, and some important rules to follow so your import goes smoothly. Before you start, it's very important that if you have UltraText software or Lacert, you must export your client data directly from those systems before working with this template. Please do not skip this step. So we're going to start with the client number column. The client number field is required. Every client number must be completely unique. We do not want to have any duplicate client numbers, so please remove those duplicate client numbers if you see them under this column. If you do not have a client number, then we will assign you a client number using our numbering sequence. Our numbering sequence starts with 1001, 1002, 1003, and so on and so forth. For the entity type column, the values that you write under here in this column, they must match exactly to what is in your Firm360 account under customizations in the ribbon on the left under the admin section, and you will see it right here. So you will click on customizations under admin, and then you will go to entity types. Whatever is here must be also in your template. If, for example, you notice that you have an entity type that is not necessarily in your Firm360 account, you can go ahead and add the entity type down here in the blue Add Entity Type button. You will just simply add in the name for it and then save. And one thing I do highly recommend is to just make sure that there are no white spaces in front of the entity type name in Firm360 and as well as in your spreadsheet. Now we move on to the client name. It's very important that if you're working with any individuals or 1040s, just know that you have to leave this field empty. The reason being, it's because we generate the names for all individuals through what's under columns O, P, Q, as well as for the spouses, which is Y, Z, and double A. So we will use anything that's populated in those two places. If you have a spouse, then you will just add the name. And if you don't, you could just leave it blank and just add a primary contact. For all the businesses, you will have the business name here under the client name column. And it is optional, but highly recommended to add a primary contact name for the business. If example, you have a contact that also has a business, like in this case, we have John R. Doe that has an individual and a business, then you will need to make the primary information, so all the way from O to W, you will need to make it all exactly the same. The reason being is because once we import your client data, the system knows that if this contact, John R. Doe, has all this information the same in both individual and client, it means that it's the same person. If by any chance you know that it is the same person, but let's say in the business you are missing the middle name and you are missing tax ID, the SSN. If you have it like this, then in the import system, once it imports, the system will think that these are two different people. So then it will create one contact for John R. Doe and then another contact for John Doe, but you know that's the same person. So in this case, that's why it's just highly recommended to just look over this and just make sure that all the rows, if it's the same exact person, for them to all match with all the columns. For this phone column is only for businesses only. Please do not populate any information for the individual. When it comes to address and all the way to country, country is optional. For this section, just make sure that all the information in here is accurate because this is the information, the address that will show up in your invoices for your client. Now moving on to the partner in charge, column L. So this partner in charge column is a required field for imports. The user you enter here must also be an active user in Firm360. The way that you know who is an active user in Firm360, it's if you go under the admin section and you go to users, you will see their names there. And they must also have the partner in charge role. For the manager and bookkeeper, these are optional fields that you can have in Firm360. It's not required. So for these, both of them, the users also must exist in Firm360 under that users tab, just how you have partner in charge. So as long as they're active users, we can go ahead and use them. One thing that I would like to note for the manager role. So for the manager role, they do get notified of failed payments if your firm is connected to Stripe. The bookkeeper in this case does not receive any of those notifications. Also, if you have a limited user role in your firm, the manager assignment is what allows those users to access that specific client. And something to keep in mind is if you are thinking about using a client custom field instead for the manager column, just know that you will not get notified because that is a client custom field. So if you do have a true manager, it is recommended to just add them under this manager column. Now moving on to the primary contact, middle name, last name, and just primary contact information in general. As we already spoke about for all individuals, you must have this populated, which is why I have all of these highlighted because that is required for individuals. For client portal access, if you want your contact, which is the person in the business, if you want your contact to have client portal access, then you must have the primary first name, middle name, last name. If you do not have a middle name, just leave it empty. So be first name, last name, the tax ID, the email address, and the mobile phone number. The email address is used as the username in the client portal, so it must be unique to all contacts. For the mobile phone number, it's required because they will receive a 2FA code to their mobile phone when they go and try to log into the client portal. This is just for extra security measures that we take. And the tax ID social is required for the client portal because that is what they will use as their password. So they will use the last four. If you do not by any chance want to populate the full social, you can do it in the way of the format as like 111-11 and then the last four. Something very important that I also want to tell you guys, and like just so you could know this information, um, for the email address. So let's say I have John Ardo. In order for you to have client portal access, remember I said that each contact must have a unique email address. So let's say Taylor, which is a whole nother person. They don't know each other. They're not related, nothing. If Taylor has John's email, then John and Taylor are not going to have client portal access because the email is being repeated, but it's being repeated on a different contact. So a different person has that email. This in this situation, you need to remove the email from Taylor and truly assign out Taylor's real email address to her profile. If you do not know this information, then you could just leave it empty. If you do not know the date of birth, etc., you can leave that empty, but it's better to have as much information populated as possible. And I do repeat again, if you have the same person, please make sure that all the columns or primary columns are exactly the same. Moving on to spouses. If you have a spouse, same thing, almost like the primary contact, just populate all the information that you have for the spouse. Okay, so now for alternate contact columns. So it will range from AI all the way to AQ. Alternate contact columns is only for individual entity types, so your 1040s. What this is, it's basically used a lot for child and parent relationship. So let's say you have a client. Let me just hide this to make it a little bit easier for us to review. So let's say you have Taylor, and Taylor is your individual child. So let's do individual, right? And Taylor is going to be your individual child. Let's remove this. Okay. Taylor's your child, but the parent is also a client that you have. In this case, you will not populate Taylor's primary contact email with the parent's information. You will not populate the mobile phone number as well. All this information in the primary contact is going to be for that client. So it will be for Taylor's Swift client. And then you will add the contact information of the parent as the alternate contact. So that will be the parent that you will contact instead of Taylor. So here, let's say John Ardo is the parent. You're going to copy this and paste it there. So let's just move this a little bit better because it is definitely unorganized. So, for instance, John is Taylor's father. Perfect. Now the system knows, hey, I have John, the individual, but John is also Taylor's dad. And then he's going to be the alternate contact. So in the system, it will show John as a contact under Taylor's client. So Taylor will end up having two contacts. It will be Taylor and then John as the parent and the alternate contact. Now for any notes. So any notes here, all of this like notes, location, registration dates, parent billing, and FIE. These columns are going to be under the main page of your client. So let's say I'm going to go into my individual. Let's go into this one. So it will show here. So you will see the registration date, you will see the entity type, and if it's a business, then you will see the FYE. So let's go into Bose. So in Bose Barbecue, you're going to see the FYE of December. Okay. So then now location. Location is only for office locations. So if you have more than one office location, just make sure that you tie each client to the correct office. And then you will also need to add this location in your Firm360 account. If you go to settings, you will need to enable the support multiple office location. You will turn it on. Right now it is on. Then you will go to customizations and you will click on locations. And here you will have all the locations that you have for your offices. Registration date, I already showed you that. And then parent billing number. So for parent billing, this is in the case of, again, like the child and parent relationship. If you want the parent, John, to pay the invoice for Taylor, you're going to put John's client number in Taylor's column and row. So that way the system knows, hey, John, client ID 1002. So let's say like that. So client ID 1002 is going to pay the invoice for client ID 1003, and it's Taylor. And then FIE, I already showed you that. That is under the main page. And then here, the only thing just to know is that you need to write out the month. So instead of like it being 12/31, 2025, you're just going to do December and etc. and so forth. And that really much covers everything you need to know about the client data import template. If you follow these guidelines, your import should go smoothly. And if you run into any issues, just double check all the fields that we covered today. Again, all the ones in yellow are required, but we do highly recommend and suggest to populate as much information as you have as possible. It's much better to enter all the information now than it would be later on. Thank you so much for watching.